The festive season is upon us, and for many, it's time to sit back and unwind, or perhaps travel just to clear your mind. With the country's economic challenges, though, many people say they'll be forced to have a quieter festive season due to financial constraints. I'm joined now by clinical psychologist Dr. Tumi Mashego to give us some tips on dealing with stress and depression during what is supposed to be a happy time. Dr. Mashego, thank you very much for your time. Can I ask you first about... Good morning. Can I ask you first about seasonal depression? I didn't even know that such a thing existed. What is seasonal depression, and why would people be stressed at certain times of the year?
Definitely, seasonal depression has to do with different seasons. Also, the climate, as in some people get more depressed in winter as opposed to, when there's sunshine. But also just, the different seasons of our lives, but also the different seasons of what society deems we must celebrate in that season. For now, the season that we are in is more a festive holiday mood, where some people can be more depressed because of their reality.
Yeah. So apparently there are 9 ways to manage holiday blues, and I'm specifically choosing to focus the attention in this period of December. It's a happy season.
Yes.
Talk to us about some of those.
Yeah, it's meant to be a happy season, but it's not always the case, because I think most of us, or most people during the year, tend to then, not focus on their reality, or they're able to avoid their reality. But in this season, everything shuts down, where it forces you to sit with yourself and to actually, sit with whatever it is your reality is. So it's not always nice for people, but I think the first thing is that we need to actually start being aware of the need for us to do the work and to actually start dealing with our reality, but also to, the festive season has become so commercialized that we actually need to go back to actually the core of what the season is meant to be about, so that we're not actually feeling under pressure to do what the neighbor does or what people do in the season when actually it's not our reality. So it's very important for us to actually, start looking at our realities for what they are and to actually deal with them accordingly. And it's not always easy, because that means one must sit and be self-aware and do the internal work to make sure they cope. And also to know that it's okay to be different. So if you're not doing what your neighbor is doing or what people in your family are doing, it's also okay to choose not to celebrate the way other people celebrate. Yeah. But of course, that comes with a lot of rejection. It might come with a lot of isolation, when you stand your truth or your reality. So I think, it also requires one to have the courage to do that and the support from someone to actually do that, sometimes even a professional. Because when you tell your family, I'm not going to celebrate this because I don't believe in it, or because I do not have the funds for it, I choose to do this year or do this differently, it might come with a lot of resistance from the family.
Yeah, and you use the word isolation. So some people may possibly be feeling isolated during this time, and maybe not even being able to do what they used to enjoy at a certain time in their lives. How do people manage the stress that does come about? How do you manage it in such a way that it does not completely lead to depression?
It's important to become, self-aware. Firstly, which is not always easy. But once you see that, I'm struggling, or I'm triggered by the holiday season, or I'm triggered by the need to be with family, then I think that's when one must do the work. And with psychiatric or psychological issues, it's always difficult in that you must want the help. You must see the need for the help and actually make the decision to do the work, which is not always easy for people to come to that decision. But I think, as a society, we need to actually start re-looking at the traditions that, are being passed on from generation to generation. That what is the value add to our lives, but also that what is the source of these things? Where do they come from? I think we also need to understand some of these traditions and start questioning them so that we're not just finding ourselves spiraling, at the end of each year where we're celebrating things we don't quite understand, just for the sake of fitting in.
Yeah.
But it's not always easy not to fit in. But I think once people are aware of what is it that is triggered in them, or they get a sounding board to help them become aware of that, it becomes easier to navigate the difficult feelings and the emotions.
And perhaps it would be worth talking about coping mechanisms. I'm going to ask you for your top 3, but looking at this list here of ways to manage these feelings, top of the list says you must limit your alcohol intake. So what other things do you do in order to avoid going for the obvious bottle in order to suppress whatever bad feelings you may have?
The first thing is to budget. I think sometimes we go overboard in terms of the budget because of this. So if you haven't budgeted for that bottle, I would recommend that you actually do not stretch that budget, which is already stretched because of the hard times we find ourselves in. But to actually, when you feel like, this is what I need to do to survive this time, or my family members, then obviously that means please find a clinical psychologist nearby. And people often say that we are not accessible, we're not available, but we are there in the public sector as well. People can't just go to their nearest clinic to find out where the clinical psychologist is based in that area. But, it becomes important to be self-aware, to realize what is it about, this season, or what is happening in me that requires me to self-medicate or to take alcohol. Yeah. And remember also, self-medication is not just substances like alcohol. It can be your, Panado, your over-the-counter medications. And food sometimes can become also a crutch. So I think it's just that self-awareness, which is not always easy, but it is possible when you decide to, journey and navigate whatever's going on in our subconscious. Because everywhere we go, there we would be. So even if you're going away from the hustle and bustle of work, you're actually going with the things that you were struggling with all throughout the year. It's just that at this time, they might become more evident because there's no distractions. I mean, literally everything shuts down.
Yeah.
And to also just prioritize choosing what it means, the holiday season, for you as a person, even if sometimes it goes against the family. So just be aware that you need to choose what it is, how you celebrate this season and how you rest in this time. And it's also okay if, you don't do what others are doing in this time. But of course, it takes a lot to come to that conclusion that I need to be different from other people, but it is possible.
Yeah, and as we conclude, here's one that stands out for me. Be open to new traditions. This is something that
definitely.
This is something that challenges one. So, what kind of things could we possibly get involved in?
I mean, we can do, tradition is literally what you make it out to be. But as I've said, over the years, over time, over decades, we've been this tradition of going home, overindulging in certain things and doing certain things and activities. But I think we actually need to question what was the value add for this. And if it means just staying with your immediate family, be it just your children, and not necessarily traveling at this time where everything is overpriced, make it to be okay. You will travel another time in the year. So even if it's having a big lunch, even if you don't have a big lunch, it's still okay to do, to be different, to do things that actually matter to you, because, we put all this effort and it's literally for a few hours during this month. So I think we really need to relook at the bigger picture, and if there is no value add, be okay with letting it go. But, there will be resistance from people, but when you put in the work, you can survive that as well.
Dr. Tumi Mashego, let me thank you very much for your time and that sage advice as we go into the festive season. But you perhaps are dealing with what, as we labeled starting this conversation, as holiday blues, to kick those away. Dr. Tumi Mashego sharing some good advice on how to deal with that. She is a clinical psychologist. Perhaps here's one. Perhaps two. I think. Exercise regularly. Avoid overeating before heading out to social events. Just some of the things that are recommended here in order to deal with stress. Sometimes it actually, it weighs you down.